Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So in this video, I want to give you a bit of an insight into my thoughts about preservation. And I always start a project with doing a mind map and trying to order and figure out my thoughts. So this is also where my journey with preservation started. I also took a look around my room and the house I'm living in currently to find things that I think might be prepared. And the first thing I stumbled about was music. Because I've got an old record player playing a record for my granddad, and we've also got a piano and with a lot of old music. And I sort of thought music in a way is preservation because somebody intentionally wrote things down to be preserved. And also I looked into a lot of books, and I think the first thought that comes into your mind if you think about preservation for me was also preserving knowledge. So there's stories, there's books. I actually found a book with maps inside, so a drawing of old countrysides in Britain. And I thought, okay, drawing, paintings, anything that's visual in any way is preservation. So I also looked at my bed sheets that are filled with some stitching work from one of my relatives, I'm not quite sure which one, and I sort of thought that also in a way is preservation. And then I sort of thought, okay, if craft and storytelling is preservation, then also capturing the reality is definitely preservation. And I guess that started with paintings, but we were able to build cameras and capture realities. And I looked at some old dias from my German granddad because he was very into photography. And there was one called Autumn Atmosphere. I think it was 1957. And I thought that was so inspiring because there was still snow on it. And now, of course, we don't have snow in autumn here. So that's definitely a kind of preservation for me. And then thinking of the future and thinking of now, we now have 3D scanning, we have AI, we have simulations that are all this kind of digital preservation that's sort of very new. So there's all these crafts and technologies of how we can preserve. And then I was sort of looking into how do humans preserve nature? And I think that's a really sad and interesting question because I think for me, sadly, looking at the things I found in my room, the answer would be destruction. Because I have this old butterfly that is sort of pinned onto a cardboard. And then I found lots of preserved flowers that were picked and then pressed and dried. And I was sort of wondering if that makes sense, and if stopping time in something fluent as nature, if that's preservation in any way. But it also seems like we are preserving our identity. I found lots of engravings on trees and little sort of hellos on benches where people tried to preserve and sort of say that they were here. Looking back, it seems we once preserved knowledge for others, but we are now preserving ourselves. And if that is the case, and if we're looking back, who decided in our society what was worthy of preservation and who was forgotten and left behind, or what was forgotten? But I also think that the approach nature takes is really interesting because I live in an area here that was once the bottom of the ocean, and millions of years ago this was ocean, and you can actually still find traces. You can find fossils and really interesting stones here. And I actually found a little ammonite, and I was really sort of happy that I found one. And then Dennis, a family member of mine, said he was actually working on a construction site at the moment. So with him, I snuck into this construction site and I had a look at all the earth layers. And I've never seen anything like it. There were so many, and I took a few, but I couldn't decide which ones. And looking at all these earth layers, sort of for me, resembled all these time periods that we had named. And currently I feel we know so much about each time period that sometimes it feels like that we live in all of them. And this linear time system that humans have created seems to not work anymore. and that sometimes we're sort of drowned in knowledge and memory and preservation. And I think in these unusual times, it so often seems that time has just sort of stopped and that there has been a suspension of the presence. And yeah, so at the end of all my mind mapping and research, my head sort of sounded like my voice is sounding now a bit confused. And I sort of wondered, what does that mean for my project? And I think it all comes down to looking at the way nature preserves, because I think the beautiful thing for me about the natural preservation was this accidental preservation, because none of these ammonites sort of thought, oh, I'm going to die here, so that millions and millions of years after my death somebody can dig me up again and feel this connection to Earth. I was wondering if humans sort of really select what they preserve, if that has led to many things being forgotten, and who was forgotten. And I think there's been a lot of debate about all these memorials and all these statues in cities, and sort of wondering if preserving these images of a time that is now very questioned in some cases, if that's worthy of preservation. So I want to preserve accidents. So how can I phrase this better? I want to look into accidental preservation, and try and create randomness to then find objects or things that I will preserve and see what that is. So yeah, I think that's it. Those were my thoughts about preservation. Thanks for listening. And yeah, see you in my next video. Bye!